And we are live. Okay. So, Stefany, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great that you managed to make the time, and we really appreciate all of that. And there will be probably a lot of our regular viewers will know of LearnLife, and probably it might even be connected to you because you seem to be very much out there,
yeah,
doing lots of different stuff. So you're in lots of different circles. But just for those people that might not have come across you, would you just give a kind of brief introduction as to who you are, what you're doing in LearnLife, kind of what your role is, and also interestingly, what brought you there?
Sure. Yeah. So hi everyone. So I'm Stefany. I'm from Canada, but I'm living in Barcelona, where LearnLife is located. And I've been with LearnLife for about a year and a half or so. And I work as a global partnerships project manager. But given that LearnLife is a startup, I sort of wear many hats within that. So I work with people in different countries, actually also in Spain, who are interested in setting up their own Learn Hubs. And then also different partnerships that come up. I'm also working on an accreditation project. So yeah, a lot of different things.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the startup kind of mentality, and it's a very fluid environment, which is exciting, but also can be pretty challenging, of course.
Definitely.
I just wanted to dial back a little bit to let folks know about LearnLife itself, because really all of the stuff you're doing comes from that central concept of what this new learning paradigm is, what this movement is about. Because you mentioned startup, but it is also kind of the word movement is a bit overused sometimes, but I think it does apply here. LearnLife has become quite a force for change that's just gathering pace and gathering momentum, and acquiring lots of followers and lots of people aware, have it on the radar now. So how would you sum up what LearnLife is and does, if you can?
Ooh, that's a tricky question. It's funny. I feel like whenever somebody joins LearnLife, it takes a few months to be able to do that, to summarize
it keeps growing, yeah.
what we do, because it's like, where do I begin? But yeah, so LearnLife is a community of a learning community of lifelong learners. And we have in Barcelona physical hubs. So there we have full-time learners, and they are they're there for Monday to Friday full-time, and then we also work to really try to innovate and change education systems around the world in different ways, from empowering educators to parents, school leaders, government officials, basically anybody who feels like they know that the system is broken and is outdated, and maybe they don't know exactly where to start, or they come to us to try to get some support or collaborate with us in different ways.
Okay, so I mean, it's as it appears. I mean, you've got that local focus on one hand, which is your full-time learners in this learning environment, in this physical space. But of course, you're connected through I think it's the Learning Alliance, isn't it? To all of these thought leaders and movers and shakers to try to plant those seeds. And then, if I understand it, that's when you're kind of following up on that and saying, well, now that the idea is spreading, it's time to plant those local seeds in different areas, and is that something is that where you come in?
So yeah, sort of. So what happens is, actually, instead of us looking for people who want to set up hubs, we find that people come to us. So they hear about us through different ways, whether word of mouth. Our two of our three co-founders, Stephen Harris and Christopher Pomeranning, are both sort of active on social media. So they may have heard from us that way, about us that way. So people come to us saying, hey, we really need something like this in whatever city. Can we talk about how we could set something up here? So we find it's, whether it's concerned parents or teachers or entrepreneurs, we have kind of different profiles of people that come to us, and yeah, that's kind of when I step in and have a conversation with them about what that could look like.
So even the partnership approach is fluid, isn't it? It's not. I mean, this is what I find interesting, because I find that when you get to this idea of innovation and education, you do have sometimes a clash of cultures where the business side is coming in, and the fit can be clunky. And when people start to talk about scaling a model, it makes my hair stand on end, because
Yeah.
that is the problem. That is the production line model of thinking, that you can take something and scale it up and replicate. And we are not products like that. Education is not like that. So it sounds to me that what you're talking about is a far more organic process. And I like the idea of the model and the movement spreading instead of scaling. Feels more instinctively right. So I wanted to ask you about the different profiles of people that come to you, because it's interesting that parents come to you. And that's something we've been talking about a lot recently is, do you think it's something that's been accelerated by the pandemic, that it's exposed those kind of flaws in the system, and parents are starting to say, we're going to take charge of this if you're not going to do something about it? Is that the way that parents are approaching you?
Yeah, I mean, if we go to sort of the origin story of LearnLife, I mean, that's how we started, right? It was Christopher who, as a concerned parent of, at the time, 2 young kids, was like, hey, what does the future of education look like for my children? It's not looking good. What can I do about that? So given that that's the way that we started, it doesn't surprise me that other parents come to the same conclusion and then take it upon themselves to try to find solutions. I do think that, yes, the pandemic is a big part of it. Obviously, with having their kids at home, parents are seeing, okay, what are they actually learning? How are they interacting with their teachers? Is this useful? How disengaged or engaged are they? And are they? And of course, there are some parents who are satisfied, but lots who are like, wait, this isn't right. This isn't going to help my kids, when in the future. So yeah, that's definitely one factor. And then another, I would say, is parents who are maybe already quite involved in their children's education. So whether they were being homeschooled, or they were at some kind of, I don't like to use the term, but like alternative school, let's call it. So yeah, I would say it's a lot of times it is parents who kind of had this extra vested interest in their children's education.
So how does that work then? Because we've been looking at, for example, last week we were talking a lot about, micro schools, which came from the sort of pandemic pods, as they're called, where parents were looking exactly what you say. They were seeing what was happening in the sort of online education being provided by their local school, and saying, hey, hang on, is this what they're doing? Let's see if we can do better. And of course, you've got these pandemic pods set up where local parents would get together and say, right, between 6 or 8 of us, let's split the cost of a teacher and design it ourselves. But then, of course, you've got the problem of access. It's not exactly representative of true diversity, is it? It's not a diverse and inclusive learning environment. It's kind of privileged in a way. So do you find that maybe the key to overcoming that is to work with existing institutions, and kind of plant the seed of LearnLife within them? Or, I mean, how do you get across that? How do you make sure that access is broadened?
Yeah, I mean, definitely when it's, a parent or 2 parents who come to us saying that they want to take this on, one of the first things that I say is, okay, who else is on your team? It's great that they want to take it on themselves, but realistically, if you're setting up a Learn Hub, so the micro school thing might be a bit different, but if you're setting up a hub, I mean, you're setting up a business. So, there are many different profiles and different skills that are needed to do that. So then we encourage them, okay, who can you reach out to in your community? Do you have, any connections to anybody who knows about entrepreneurship, right? Finance, raising funds, etc. Are there any, local businesses, organizations? Is there any government, are there any subsidies or anything that could help you there? So yeah, that's definitely a first step that we encourage them to grow their team in order to have different skill sets. And then that way, you know, the idea would be to be able to put together a bigger project. And then also if there will be tuition, then you can also kind of offer scholarships. And there are also people who want to set up a public hub, right? So working with the local government to set up a hub for that reason. There's a group in Bristol actually who are looking to do that. And they said exactly that. They don't want it, you know, to be a place where it's only for those who can afford it. So they really want to be publicly funded, and all of these different models work. So there's not one way that a hub will look or be run. There are many ways to configure that.
It's a case of kind of beautiful synchronicity, isn't it? That a lot of people who are hyper aware of the failings of the current education system, you know, these people are often people who have succeeded in spite of their education and not because of it. And you find a lot of entrepreneurs in that pool, which is
definitely
such beautiful synchronicity, because then they are the people who can then apply their talents to making education better for the next generation. So it's such a great cycle. And I'm sure you find lots of like a diverse talent pool in the community around these parents who are ready to step in and support. But what I'd like to ask you is just for people that are thinking about, okay, well, if I want to send my child to a traditional mainstream school in my area, you know, which is, you know, let's be fair. I mean, in places like I'm in Scotland right now, we have the curriculum for excellence. There's a lot of talk about nature-based learning, about learning through play, about things like that. But it's not transversal. It's generally not experiential. It's not, you know, there's a lot of terminology, but it's not really living that. So I just wanted to see if I can ask you, what is the actual distinction between, you know, a traditional school and a Learn Hub, you know, and why would parents be thinking about, you know, that as the preferable option for their children?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are a lot of differences, maybe more than similarities. So the in the Learn Hub, we don't separate. I mean, hence the name LearnLife, but we really don't separate sort of what, you know, otherwise a learner would consider real life and then school, right? So these two things are merged together because we think that's much more representative of, you know, of the way that life works. So the idea is also for the learners. So there are sort of like four pillars for learner agency, and I'm actually having a little peek at the chapter that Devin, who is our director of learning, wrote in a book called Unleashing the Power of Learner Agency. So he talks about sort of four elements that everything is based on. So it's positive relationships, self-confidence, self-management, and then program design. So it's the way that the learning happens is that, you know, the learners are encouraged to find their passions, to find their calling. They're guided, right, by the learning guides. So we don't call them teachers, we call them learning guides, who are there to really mentor and support them on their learning journey. And then the idea is for them to become lifelong learners, right? So they find passion and joy in what they're learning, and then they continue learning for the rest of their lives. And the focus is also on 21st century skills. So rather than, you know, also it doesn't really represent real life to have like math in a silo, English in a silo, right? Like when you solve a problem, you're not like, oh, is this a math problem or a geography, you know, problem? Like things are often really, really meshed together. So kind of approaching problems in this much more comprehensive and complex way. And with, you know, with a lot of projects. So we don't work with grades, we don't work with exams. And then also something else that I think is quite different is when learners are being, when they're receiving feedback. So before they receive feedback, so when they're planning a project, they're actually going to choose which aspects they want to be evaluated on, right? So, you know, the example is if you're making a movie, maybe you're really focusing on the dialogue or the editings, and the other parts are just there to kind of complete the project. So instead of feeling like attacked and under all this pressure, they feel supported, and they can choose, okay, what did I focus on, and what do I want to be evaluated on? And it's a much more holistic way of doing that. And also the parents are really involved in their learning as well. We every end of the cycle, they have like a 360 feedback where they reflect on the cycle, which is like a term, and what they learned, and they reflect a lot on their learning, and they always have peers, and then they have a parent there. So it's just it's a really different, but also like I think a really natural and organic way of learning. When you're in one of, if you're in a hub and you see the way that things happen, it just feels healthier and more natural. Like, people want to actually be there, they're being their true selves. And that's when we thrive, right? When we're comfortable and when we feel supported by, and we think people have our best interest in mind. So
absolutely. I mean, it is truly the social responsibility of education, isn't it? To help people be the best, most authentic versions of themselves. And, too many generations have come through modeling where they've had sort of like later in life. I mean, I think about phrases like, the midlife crisis,
right,
and stuff like that, stuff that's become so normalized that we think it's almost an inescapable truth. Whereas, well, why are people having this? It's because they haven't, been able to connect with their authentic self, or uncovered what makes them them.
Totally.
And that's why you have these identity issues and things like that. So it's hugely encouraging, but also hugely complex. And this is what I want to ask you about, because, going into LearnLife in Barcelona and observing how things are done there, and you've got the learning guides, and, your director of learning, you've got all these people involved on the ground, and they, of course, are able to ensure that these core skills like literacy and numeracy are reflected in a way that is co-designed, isn't it? It's co-created, it's collaboratively structured. So it's not like, we're going to test it in this way, and if you fit into that box, then lucky you, and if not, then sorry. But that's not easy, especially as most teacher training is focused on preparing you for the system as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the big question for me is, how do you ensure that same level of quality when you are creating hubs, where you can't necessarily go and observe the day-to-day? How do you maintain that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. So when we work with partners to open other hubs, we do it through, we see it we empower them via a knowledge transfer from the Barcelona team. And we do this through a list of services, and we call it learning as a service. So these services that we have, we know are necessary to launch a hub and then to sustain it. So everything starts even with with recruitment, right? So the team is so key to what is happening. And one person that doesn't fit with this culture and this way of doing things can sort of ruin it for everybody. So we recruit, and we recruit the team, and especially the learning guides. That's a huge process. So it's like a 4-step process. Besides interviews and personality things, there are also sessions where they actually interact with learners, and then the learners get to give feedback on how it was. So it's like a very comprehensive process. And so that would be, I guess, the first step, right? So having a solid team. And then what we do is, we don't have, it's not that LearnLife has a curriculum. So, okay, you buy the curriculum and now good luck implementing it. So what we do is that we would train the learning guides so that they learn how to create, how to put together these building blocks, which are the subjects, and to create the different learning experiences that fit the context. So you were talking before about scaling and how, it's not like an out of the box solution. And that's totally what we believe. Everything has to be contextualized, and we don't know what your community needs. You know what your community needs, but what we can do is train you on, everything related to the new paradigm and all of these different methodologies that we use, so that you can create the learning experiences and build the schedules and that you need for your community. And then basically your trainers would be there at certain key points in the cycle in the first year. And then we're putting together we're looking for a better name, but it's like a quality assurance sort of check, right? So we're a couple of times a year, we do go and visit, and we really want it to be a process of like support and empowerment. So it's not that we're coming to police you and to make sure that, everything is lined up and you're using the same things that we're using. It's just to make sure that things are running smoothly and that maybe we can see any blind spots that you can't. And then from that will come the continuous professional development, right? So, best practices innovation doesn't just stop. It's not like you learn how to do it once and then you never need to do it again. Actually, the learning guides in the Barcelona hub have professional development every single Friday for half of the day. So through this kind of quality assurance check, and then through this continuous training is how we plan to make sure that all the hubs will kind of be running at the same level of as we're intending.
It's encouraging to know that it's done like that, because I'm thinking several things cropped up when you were explaining that, and I'm thinking it's as much a process of unlearning for people that are setting this up as anything else, isn't it? It's we are all greatly affected by the environment we've experienced. Not many of us attended forest schools in Sweden or whatever. Yeah. We went to bricks and mortar, grey buildings and porta cabins and all kinds of stuff. We've had those experiences. Yeah. And so even things like the quality assurance, and I know what you mean about finding a less threatening name.
A warmer term, a more LearnLife-y term.
Yeah. But I can see that, how difficult it would be to get from the point of even very subconsciously feeling like that was going to be some sort of judgment on you, to the point you want to get to, which is actually, I can't wait for them to come because it's an experience to learn, and growth and feedback and reflection is healthy.
Totally.
I mean, there's a chasm between those two that takes a lot of unlearning. So it's good to know that there's such a focus on training and support. And I just want to kind of broaden out and just ask, so I mean, so here I am in Inverness, and if I'm a parent, like looking around and saying, you know what, my daughter is coming home from school every day, and she doesn't seem that excited by what she's doing. She really lights up when she does other stuff that unfortunately doesn't happen in the classroom. The homework seems to just be pretty formulaic. The grades that she's getting are, what is a letter? Arbitrary. All of that stuff, and I call LearnLife and say, I want to do something about it. Walk me through the process. What happens? What are the stages? What support is offered?
Yeah. So your first call would be with me, and basically I try to get to know sort of your profile, like what your expectations are, what your status quo is, and then there are different hub options that we have. So at the smallest level, we have what we call a hubling, so like a baby hub, and this can be as small as 60 square meters. So you can convert basically any 60 square meter space into like a little an innovation hub within a bigger space. Often it can be a school, but it could be a co-working, it could be a community center. So if this school was open to a transformation, to doing something different, that would be a good way to start. So in the hubling, we can help you with some, space design, furniture, etc. But that's, of course, not the most important part. The most important part is what happens in the space, right? So we find a lot of, especially private schools, have these like beautiful, pristine maker spaces, and then nobody really knows how to use them. So that's what we want to avoid. So if you wanted to develop this space to be maker space focused, or if you wanted to be, some other kind of technology, but it doesn't have to be. It could be a space where learners work on passion projects, or they work on different challenges to help the community, or anything that brings in learning in this more sort of 21st century scale, self-directed, co-created way. So basically what we would need you to do is to have the support from the leadership team, of course. There have to be the funds there for if there's any need for renovation, and then for the training, and then at least 2 teachers who want to do this 60-hour training, and then also a workshop. So through this training and this workshop, we would help the teachers pinpoint what the needs are of their school and the role that they want the Hubling to play, and then how they can incorporate that into if they want to incorporate into the existing curriculum and the schedule. Because yeah, definitely what we don't want to do, and what we know would be received with rejection, would be to make the teachers feel like they have more work, right? Yeah. So on top of there, so we that's why the leadership needs to be willing to free up some hours of those teachers' schedules so that they can truly dedicate their time to this, rather than feeling like it's something extra. And then the idea with the Hubling is that it'll sort of positively infect slowly the rest of the school, right? So first, maybe it's 2 teachers and the other teachers are like, hey, what are they doing in there? Oh, that looks cool. How can we, how can we use that space? And then eventually it will sort of, seep way beyond the walls. So that would be one way to do it, which is possibly, it's maybe more tangible and much easier place to start. If you want to start with a full-blown hub, I mean, the size that's up to you. But there you would need, of course, more funds and more resources, and a bigger team, like I mentioned, somebody who knows about entrepreneurship, about fundraising. You need a more comprehensive team. So there we would help you. Also, you have to kind of define what you want the space to be like. You would come up with a concept for it. And then we can start, after signing contracts, etc. We can start with the recruitment. Okay, so who do you need first? Do you need sort of the pedagogical head of the school? We can help you with the space design. We can help you with even locating a space. Of course, all of the training. Operations, and then we have a whole list of services for the founding team around vision and mission, business plan, and then we're also developing a tech platform, so that's kind of a little bit further down the road. So that's a standard hub, and then we also have like what we're calling these lighthouse hubs. So they're kind of more campus-like settings where you maybe the learning, this sort of like primary, secondary aged learning spaces would just be part of it, and you could have other complementary services like a wellness center, some kind of a community center, etc. That's like for a huge project where there's a lot more development needed there.
So really bespoke. I mean, it sounds like that. It sounds like it's grown organically, which I mean fits with your approach to everything in LearnLife, doesn't it? Not starting with preconceived structures, but simply a set of best practices that can evolve around the needs of the people you're working with.
Yeah, I mean, we do have, the services are, there's a list there, and we know what's sort of needed. But I think what we try to do is just the way that we wouldn't expect every learner to start in the same place. We know that not every project starts in the same place. So we want to meet you where you are. So, okay, you already have this part really solid. Well, then great. We trust you to really sort of self-direct on that part. And we're going to give you more support on this other part where perhaps you need a little bit more.
Yeah, it sounds like there's quite clearly, a lot of import given to the people you're working with in terms of who's there to lead on the ground. You need the champions, don't you? And it is tricky because, we're working in a time of initiative fatigue in education systems. As you say, teachers can perceive, okay, here's the next fad, here's the next thing that I've got to do, and if it's sort of handed down from on high, as you say, there's a chance of rejection. We spoke a few months ago to Alex Moore, who's a lead teacher of innovation at Shaftesbury School in England, and he's created this sort of future classroom environment that's getting a lot of attention and things like that. But people like this are innovators, and we talk about them as innovators because they are exceptional. They're not the norm, and so a lot of schools have that kind of latent desire to do something and make changes, but the investment and time to get that expertise and that learning embedded is something that we clearly need help with. So it sounds like it's a great partnership.
Totally. And I mean, something else. So we're working with a school just outside of Barcelona, and the owner, it's like a half private, half public school. And he actually has 5 schools, and we're starting with one. And, you know, something we needed to say, and we had a few weeks back, a group of their teachers come to visit, and they're like, wow, this is amazing. You know, we did some interviews, they love it. And we're like, yes. And no, I don't want to say but, I want to say yes, and it took us a long time to get here.
Yes.
Like, you have to be really realistic about your expectations and how much progress you're going to make in 1 year, and how long. I mean, especially like even if even within a place that looks the way that LearnLife looks, people still need time to adjust and to unlearn these kind of, you know, things that society has ingrained so deeply in us. Imagine in a school that is set up in rows with, you know, with the desk and the blackboards and etc. It's not going to be an overnight thing. And I think, yeah, as long as we're, you know, everybody's realistic about the expectations and the fact that it's going to take time, but that of course it's, if people are open to it and it's done well, it will succeed.
What about the wider environment? I mean, the Hublings idea sounds like it's, you know, that's something that it could go anywhere, it could go into any institution within any wider context, which is the beauty of it. Or as you say, it could be a community center or a co-working space or whatever. And I can certainly see how that works. In terms of the wider thing, like an actual learning hub, I mean, how are you finding it with, I mean, there's vastly different education systems around the world. You know, some of them you could put in a learning hub and it's much easier to tailor it to these very kind of broad and generalized, more open descriptors on curricula and things like that. And some contexts are rigid and inflexible. I mean, how are you kind of getting around that? Are you finding more traction in certain parts of the world? I mean, what's going on with that wider environment?
Yeah, that's definitely an area where we have to be creative, and we tell partners as well that they also have to be creative thinkers with us. So it totally depends on the context. You're very right. So, for example, in Australia, we're working on a project, and they want to open actually as just an independent school. So what we're going to do for them is curriculum mapping. So we're going to map the local curriculum to the building blocks that we have, so that they can actually start within the system and transform from within, be legally operating as a school and receive the government subsidies like per learner that they have. In Germany, where we're definitely gaining a lot of traction. So Germany and Australia are the 2 places. Stephen being Australian, Christopher German, I think has something to do with it. So yeah, in Germany also, so the big hub in Hamburg that we're going to have sort of we're going to be operating the primary, secondary age learning spaces within that bigger space. So there we're also starting within the system. So the same kind of thing, curriculum mapping, and then really taking advantage of all those, you know, sort of gray areas where actually teachers do have more freedom to do more things than maybe they are aware, or that they definitely than they do. Other options are to start with just part-time, you know, afternoon programs. So a hub doesn't have to be full-time. So our Barcelona hub is, I mean, we also offer weekend and afternoons, but if you're in a place like Brazil, where we're also working with somebody and they're like, you know, it's so rigid here, we can't, then that's another option. And then yeah, as we work towards accreditation with NEOUSC, and we will be accredited as when all that works out as an international school. Yeah, we hope that will also help our future partner hubs, in order to be able to have more rights. But there are definitely some parts of the world that are much stricter than others, and where places where homeschooling is legal, I mean, then that's just easy.
This is why I have a huge amount of respect for LearnLife, because if we were to sit back and wait for those who are designing the structures to
Yes.
say, hang on, this isn't working. It's just not going to happen, is it? I mean,
No.
change has to come bottom up. It always does. It always has. But of course, education being so emotional, it's very difficult to step outside this, because the fear that can be derived from actually saying we're going to do something different, and all the very valid worries about, well, how does that bode for my child's future?
Yes.
Can they access this? Can they do this?
Sure.
These are very natural worries, but it takes a lot of courage to step and say, well, we're going to find a way. We're going to do this anyway. And even as you say, I mean, in Brazil, meeting people where they are and saying, okay, we might not be able to do this, but you can be a part of the impulse for change by being present in different forms, which is why I've got enormous respect for what you guys are doing. And I wonder what kind of challenges and resistance are you meeting? And also, have you had these kind of really encouraging conversations on the other side with, the policymakers or the people who are in a position to do something about it? What's happening at that level?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely I would be lying if I said there haven't been many challenges along the way. Fortunately, now that we're in this process with NEASC as an international school, that then allows us to do everything on the Catalan, like in Spain, on the Catalan side of things. So because they're sort of giving us the okay, then we have to meet certain requirements, and then the Catalan government will also give us the okay. But yeah, there was definitely some kind of navigation that had to take place at the beginning in terms of how we were set up. I think we had the license for an innovative learning project. I wasn't there at the very, very beginning, so I'm not sure exactly how we got in there, but obviously we had an operating license to operate the space. So, but yeah, we weren't able to, it's not like we were able to give, high school diplomas or anything like that. So there are lots of parents who are concerned. So we developed partnerships with Clone Lara, which is an American online high school. And so the learners who wanted to also pursue a high school diploma were able to kind of do this double, I don't want to call it a degree, but doing the LearnLife part of things, and then some Clone Lara, and also some of the building blocks that we had, they equated to, math or whatever. So that's how we kind of were able to deal with it. At the beginning, we're still doing that, but once we have the accreditation, we won't need to do that, because we will be able to issue our own diplomas. And then in terms of if we've received kind of encouraging feedback from the government, I mean, I know that there were some talks and things in Spain or in Catalonia at the beginning, for sure. Now I would say the focus has been shifted to Germany. So in Germany, we've had actually many conversations with different, I don't remember the names of all the kind of government people, but people in sort of higher positions in education and beyond, who are really supportive of this idea. And yeah, I'm not allowed to give details, but we are working with the city of Hamburg to put Hublings in some of their public schools. So that will be a fully government funded. So there is hope. And then in Switzerland, the first partner hub that will be opening in Zurich, one of the team members, it works for the Ministry of Education. So she's kind of driving that side of things. So what they want to do is actually they want to work with vocational training, with teacher training, and I think with grade 10s. So to actually integrate, so they want to develop, using the LearnLife methodologies, learning paradigm, etc., to develop programs with these kind of public entities, and have that be, sort of something standard. So people are becoming more and more receptive, even at the government level, but the government's always the slowest to respond, isn't it?
Well, it's getting to the right people, isn't it? Because the the policymakers who are in political office, they're thinking about votes, and they change every 4 years and stuff. So the policy is going to change, and it's a nightmare. But I think I feel like I've seen the same thing as you have, that there is a sort of change breezing through
Yes.
certain levels. And I've worked in the Catalan system myself, with
Okay.
accreditation projects. And I remember 7 years ago having pretty heated discussions, just trying to get self-reflection as an assessment model.
Wow.
And the huge resistance that I met, and eventually we got it, and it was 15% of the accreditation and blah blah blah. But the fight to get reflective practice onto that was crazy.
Yeah.
And then just a few years later, it became standard practice in Catalonia, in Navarra, and something shifted, something changed. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
even in mainstream schools, there's more work on project-based learning's becoming
Yes.
a big thing. That opens the door to more transversal experiential education. There's lots of things that seem to be coalescing. So I think the future seems pretty bright for LearnLife, and kudos for being one of the first to step out and say, well, we're going to carve our own path. And I wanted to just ask you finally, for you personally, Stefany, I mean, you're obviously really passionate. This is a labor of love. I just wonder, what do you feel about all this? What are you getting from this? What gets you out of bed in the morning? I mean, it must be challenging, must be exhausting. You must take a lot of knocks. What keeps you going?
Mm-hmm. Well, the Barcelona sunshine helps.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me I'm in
Yeah.
Inverness. Yeah.
Definitely helps in the morning. No. But yeah, I think, for me personally, I never struggled in school, but I also didn't it's not that I didn't excel. I didn't find myself, right? I was one of those students that kind of cruised through with like good marks, teachers liked me, I had fun. But when I finished, I didn't really know myself, right? So, and I think that's sad, right? There's so much lost potential in not just my generation, still generations today, because kids are not really encouraged to look inwards and to think creatively in different ways that don't involve just art. So I think that's something that I wish I had, and I love that that's something huge that that this new learning paradigm, this new way of learning, encourages. And actually, it's I speak to people from literally every corner of the world, and which I love. Also, I'm a big traveler, and I was telling you I was an English teacher before, so I've lived kind of in different places, and now I get to be located here and still talk to these people all over, and it's really great because everybody's really saying the same things, and there's something like really beautiful about that everybody's kind of coming together, realizing like, hey, this isn't working, we want to do something about it. And then I always tell them, like, that is not unique to Berlin, to Uganda, to Australia. This is everywhere, right? So first, don't feel bad. It's happening everywhere. And so we don't really do, we're not in the business of convincing people, right? So we work with the people who already know that there's a need for change, right? We have some kind of fundamental principles that we work with. And if and they're fairly broad and basic, and if you saw them, you'd be like, of course, yes. But if we can't agree on those, we're not in the business of changing your mind. So when you're ready, come to us. So basically, the people that I speak to are just like so excited to have found us, and so often I just hear, this is exactly what I was looking for, this is what I had in mind, this is what this is what I was trying to do. And it's great because it just means like, okay, it's just reassurance, like, yes, we're doing the right thing, people get it, people are supporting us, and people want to bring this to their location. So I feel pretty fortunate to be in this position where I do get to have a lot of these positive conversations with these amazing, passionate people all over the world, and try to make this to help them to make this happen.
So you're really deriving energy from that sense of purpose, of the constant reminder, I guess, that, hey, I'm doing the right thing. I mean, there's no greater driver of motivation than to leave the world a better place than you found it, right? Or to try to correct the things that that you wish you'd had
Exactly.
as a learner. And I think so many of us watching this, I'm sure, can resonate with this. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your
Thank
words
you again
and your
for having me.
ideas. No, it's been a pleasure, and bravo, kudos to LearnLife, fighting the good fight,
Yes.
taking brave steps and making real change. It's a pleasure to know more about you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you, Stefany.